Listen, I debated whether to even record this today. And I do not say that for drama. I say it because what was coming through while I was sitting with this energy before I hit record was so specific and so pointed that I genuinely had to stop and ask Spirit, are you sure you want me to say all of this out loud? Are you sure the person watching this is ready for it? And what I got back was they clicked on the title. They are ready. Say it. So here we are. Let me tell you about my cousin Bernadette. Bernadette is one of those people who has always been quietly exceptional. Not the person in the room who commands attention. Not the one with the loudest laugh or the most dramatic story. Just deeply, consistently, genuinely excellent at everything she turned her hand to. And for most of her adult life, the people closest to her, the ones who claimed to know her best, had a very particular relationship with that excellence. They acknowledged it privately. They never quite acknowledged it publicly. What I mean is this. In private conversations, Bernadette would hear things like, "You are honestly so talented. I do not understand why more people do not see that." Or, "You deserve so much better than what you have been getting." Or, "I tell people about you all the time. I brag about you constantly." But in rooms where it counted, in conversations where acknowledgement would have cost something, where vouching for Bernadette might have shifted a dynamic or redistributed attention, or required someone to share a spotlight they were comfortable keeping to themselves, suddenly those same people got quiet. Suddenly the bragging they claimed to do in private did not seem to make it into the spaces that mattered. Bernadette found out about this in the most uncomfortable way possible. A professional opportunity came through a mutual connection. Someone Bernadette had never met reached out to her because they had heard incredible things about her work. And when Bernadette traced back where the referral had come from, who had spoken her name into that room, it was not any of the people who claimed to brag about her constantly. It was someone she barely knew. Someone with no personal stake in the outcome. Someone who had simply encountered her work once and remembered it clearly enough to recommend her a year later to a stranger. And the people who had been privately celebrating her for years, they had been asked about her directly by the same connection who eventually reached Bernadette through a different route. And they had given answers that were enthusiastic but vague, positive but non-committal. The kind of answers that do not open doors. The kind of answers that leave a conversation exactly where it started. When Bernadette understood what had happened, she did not explode. She did not confront anyone. She just got very quiet and very clear. And that clarity reorganized everything about how she moved through the world afterward. What she shared with certain people, where she directed her trust, who she allowed into the inner rooms of her life versus who she kept at a comfortable social distance. That story is the heartbeat of this reading. Because what Spirit is showing me for you today is not just about someone hiding something. It is about a specific kind of hiding that happens when people who are close to you know exactly how extraordinary you are and make quiet decisions about how much of that they are willing to let the world see. And the shattering that is coming, the thing that is going to break something open in a way that cannot be put back together, is the moment that hiding becomes impossible to maintain. The moment the truth of who you actually are stops being something that certain people can manage and control and strategically deploy on their own terms. The truth of you is getting out, and it is not asking for anyone's permission. Let us see what the cards say. Card 1, the High Priestess. They have known the truth about you and chosen silence. Oh wow. Right away. The High Priestess comes out first, and she is not gentle about what she is here to say. The High Priestess is the keeper of hidden knowledge. She sits between two pillars, one dark, one light, and she holds what is true between them without revealing it. She knows. She has always known. And she chooses, with full awareness, what to disclose and what to keep in the chamber behind the veil. And in your reading, she is not representing you. She is representing someone in your life who has been sitting with knowledge about your value, your gifts, your genuine extraordinary quality, and making very deliberate choices about when to speak and when to stay silent. Here is a practical example that is going to make this hit. There is a woman named Claudette who worked in the same industry as someone she considered a close friend. And this friend knew Claudette's work deeply, had watched her up close for 3 years, had a genuine insider understanding of what Claudette was capable of that nobody else in their shared professional world had access to. And then an opportunity came up, a significant one, the kind of opportunity that reshapes a career. And it was the kind of opportunity where a word from the right person, a specific, credible, insider word, would have made all the difference. And Claudette's friend knew this, was in a position to say that word, had every credential to say it convincingly, and did not say it. Not because they forgot, not because they did not know the opportunity existed. They knew. They simply made a quiet calculation in the private space where these calculations happen and decided that saying the word at full volume in the moment it counted most was not in their interest. Maybe they wanted the opportunity for themselves or someone adjacent to them. Maybe Claudette's success in that space would have changed the power balance between them. Maybe it was nothing that deliberate. Maybe it was just the small, ordinary, deeply human instinct to hold back when your full advocacy would cost you something, even something small. The High Priestess, as the first card in your reading, is saying, this has been happening around you. Someone who has insider knowledge of what you are worth has been making strategic decisions about when to release that knowledge and when to keep it behind the veil. They have been the editor of your story in spaces where they had influence and you did not. And those editorial choices have not always been made with your best interest as the first consideration. But here is what the High Priestess also says, and Spirit is insisting I include this. The veil does not hold forever. What is known cannot remain hidden indefinitely, and the specific quality of truth, she guards your truth, your value. The real assessment that certain people have kept just out of the public's reach is pressing against the veil right now, with a force that is becoming impossible to contain. The High Priestess reversed is what happens when the veil finally gives way. And that reversal is coming. Card 2, the Moon, what has been operating in the dark, is about to be illuminated. Here we go. The Moon slides in as a second card, and if you thought the High Priestess was pointed, buckle up. The Moon is the card of hidden things, of what operates in the space that ordinary daylight does not reach, of the tides that move beneath the surface of situations, pulling things in directions that nobody is naming out loud. And in your reading, the Moon is shining a very specific kind of light on something that has been moving in the dark around you. Let me tell you the exact kind of hidden dynamic the Moon is revealing here. Picture a man named Desmond. Desmond was part of a close-knit creative community. He was talented, genuinely, specifically, undeniably talented in a way that was not a matter of opinion, it was just observable to anyone paying attention. And within that community, there was a particular person who had positioned themselves as the authority, the tastemaker, the one whose endorsement moved things. And this person had a relationship with Desmond that from the outside looked warm and supportive. They came to his events. They had him over for dinner. They said his name in complimentary ways in social situations. All of that was visible and real, and Desmond had no reason to question it. What was not visible was the conversation this person was having in rooms Desmond was not in, when opportunities were being discussed, when collaborators were being identified. When the question came up of who should be elevated next, this person's warmth toward Desmond in social settings somehow never translated into actual advocacy where it would have mattered. And more than that, there were quiet moments of diminishing. Nothing flagrant, just a carefully placed doubt here. A strategically timed qualification there. Just enough to manage Desmond's trajectory without it ever looking like management. The Moon is showing me that this kind of hidden operation has been running in your environment, not necessarily with malice in every case. Sometimes this operates from something more ordinary and more sad, pure insecurity dressed up as friendship, pure self-preservation dressed up as support. but the effect on you has been real, regardless of the interior motivation. There are people who have been operating a very different dynamic in the dark than the one they present to your face in the light. And the moon is also telling me something else that I need you to hear. You have felt this. On some level, in some quiet interior place that you may have dismissed or talked yourself out of. You have felt that something was off, that certain support was slightly hollow, that certain warmth did not quite reach the temperature it was presenting as. Your instincts were not wrong. The moon is confirming what your intuition already registered and filed under. Do not look at this too closely. Look at it. It is time. And what is going to be illuminated in this next season will finally give your intuition the external confirmation it has been waiting for. Card 3, 7 of Swords. Someone has been managing your narrative without your knowledge. Okay. 7 of Swords just landed, and I want to be very precise about how I talk about this card. Because it is easy to read it in a way that is too heavy or too conspiratorial, and that is not what Spirit is going for here. What Spirit is going for is something much more specific and much more real. The 7 of Swords is the card of information being taken and handled in ways that the original owner did not sanction. It is the card of someone moving quietly, taking what is useful to them, and leaving before anyone can fully register what just happened. And in your reading, it is pointing very directly at a situation where something about you, your story, your reputation, your specific achievements, the details of who you are and what you have done has been in someone else's hands, and they have been handling it in ways you did not authorize. Here is the practical example that is going to make this extremely clear. There is a woman named Adeze. Adeze had a mentor for several years, a genuine mentor who knew her work deeply, who had been present for her significant achievements, who had an insider seat to her professional development that nobody else had. And this mentor, whenever Adeze's name came up in professional conversations, would speak about her, would shape the impression that other people formed. What Adeze did not know was how the shaping was happening. The mentor would lead with enthusiasm. Adeze is extraordinary. Honestly, one of the most talented people I have worked with. And then would follow with a but. A carefully placed, seemingly reasonable, thoughtfully delivered but. She is extraordinary, but she is still developing her confidence. She is extraordinary, but she can be difficult to direct. She is extraordinary, but I am not sure she is quite ready for that level of responsibility yet. None of those qualifications were fabricated from nothing. That is what made them so effective. They were drawn from real moments, real observations, real instances that the mentor had witnessed. But they were being deployed strategically, selectively, in a way that kept Adeze close to extraordinary, but never quite arrived at extraordinary without reservation. And Adeze had no idea, because in every direct interaction with her mentor, the message was one of pure support. The buts only existed in rooms she was not in. That is your 7 of Swords. That is the narrative management that has been happening around you. Someone with access to the real story of who you are has been making editorial decisions about which parts of that story travel forward and which parts stay in the room with them. And those decisions have been shaping how certain people see you in ways you could not observe or correct, because you were not in the room when the shaping was happening. What Spirit is saying now is that this is ending, not gradually, abruptly, because 7 of Swords situations always have an expiration date. The person moving quietly and taking what serves them always eventually gets seen. Always. And the shattering in your title, what will shatter everything, is partly this. The exposure of the management. The moment when the full unedited story about you surfaces in a space where the editor cannot control it. And it is coming. Card 4, Judgment, the truth, is being called forward, and it cannot be recalled. Ha. Judgment in the 4th position of this reading, after the High Priestess, and the Moon, and the 7 of Swords. Spirit is building something here, and it is building to something that is going to be undeniable. Judgment is the card of things that have been buried being called to rise. of a force larger than personal preference or individual calculation, demanding that what is true become visible. It is not a gentle card. It does not ask whether the timing is convenient. It does not check whether everyone has had adequate preparation for what is about to be revealed. It simply sounds, and what it calls forward comes forward. In your reading, judgment is pointing at the specific moment when the truth about you, the full, unmanaged, unedited truth, gets called into a space where it cannot be controlled by the people who have been controlling it. And the response to that calling from the people who have been sitting on this truth is the shattering in your title. Because their entire position, the specific authority they have had to shape your narrative, the particular power that comes from being the person who knows the most about someone's value and gets to decide when and how that gets shared, collapses the moment the truth decides to move without them. Practical example for judgment in this context. There is a man named Kofi, and Kofi had been working in a field for years where his work spoke for itself clearly to anyone who encountered it directly. But direct encounter with his work was limited because a gatekeeper in his professional world controlled the flow of that access. People knew about Kofi through this gatekeeper. They formed impressions of Kofi through this gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper had their own reasons, not purely malicious, just profoundly self-interested for keeping those impressions at a specific temperature. Warm enough that Kofi stayed in the ecosystem. Not so warm that Kofi developed independent influence. And then, something happened that the gatekeeper could not have anticipated. Kofi's work landed directly in front of someone significant. Not through the gatekeeper. Not through any of the managed channels. Through pure circumstance, a connection who had nothing to do with the gatekeeper's world encountered Kofi's work cold and was stunned by it. And that person had both the influence and the enthusiasm to talk about what they had encountered at a level and in spaces that the gatekeeper could not reach or moderate. The judgment moment was when that talking started happening. When the unmediated truth about Kofi's work began moving through spaces where the gatekeeper had no editorial authority. When impressions that had been carefully managed at a specific temperature suddenly were being formed by people who had encountered the full original thing and were responding to it without filters. That is what is coming for you. The unmediated truth of who you are is finding its way into spaces where the people who have been managing it cannot follow. And the response from those people, from the world receiving the unfiltered version, is going to shatter the construction that has been built around you. Not painfully, liberatingly. This is not a destruction. This is a revelation. Card 5, the star on the other side of the shattering, is something extraordinary, yes. The star. Right here after all of that. Spirit always does this, and I love it every time. Takes you through the intensity of what is real and true and uncomfortable, and then puts the star down and here is where it all leads. The star is the card that appears after collapse. After the tower falls, or the veil lifts, or the carefully managed construction comes apart. It is the card of the clear sky that remains when everything that was blocking the view has finally been removed. And it carries with it this specific quality of hope that is not naive. It is hope that has been earned through having survived the storm that preceded it. In your reading, the star is saying that the shattering in your title is not the end of your story. It is the clearing of space for something that could not exist while the construction was still standing. Because here is what hidden things do. They do not just hide what is bad. They hide what is good too. When someone has been managing and controlling and curating your narrative, what they are managing and curating is the full picture. And the full picture includes the extraordinary parts. The parts that would have opened doors. The parts that would have connected you with the right people at the right time. The parts that would have accelerated your path in ways that the hidden management was quietly, consistently preventing. When that management ends, when the hiding becomes impossible to maintain, and the full truth of who you are enters spaces it was being kept out of, what arrives with it is not just the revelation of who was hiding what. What arrives is access. Opportunity. The doors that should have been open a long time ago suddenly opening because the thing that was blocking them has been removed. Practical example for the star. Think about someone who had been working in the shadow of a person who had taken the role of their champion but was actually functioning as their ceiling. And when that relationship ended, when the pseudo-champion was removed from the equation by circumstance or by the person's own courage, or by the kind of exposure that Spirit has been describing throughout this reading, what the person discovered was astonishing. The world of people and opportunities and connections that had been on the other side of that relationship this whole time. The conversations that had not been happening because the pseudo-champion was quietly managing them. The doors that had not been opening because someone's hand was resting on them from the other side. The moment that hand lifted, the moment the clearing happened, the star quality of what was waiting was almost overwhelming. Not because life became perfect, because the path became visible in a way it had not been before. And visible paths can be walked. Managed paths, curated paths. Paths where someone else holds the lantern and decides how much light you get, those are not really your paths at all. Your star is saying your actual path is becoming visible. And it is more beautiful than what you have been allowed to see so far. Card 6, Ace of Swords, the clarity coming is going to cut through everything straight up. Ace of Swords coming in as the 6th card, and this is the energy of truth arriving with zero apology and zero softening. The Ace of Swords does not negotiate. It does not arrive gently and ask whether you are ready and offer to come back later when it is more convenient. It arrives. It cuts through. And what remains after the cutting is unmistakably, undeniably, cannot be argued with clear. In your reading, the Ace of Swords is the specific form that the shattering takes. It is not a slow unveiling. It is not a gradual dawning. It is a sudden, sharp, entirely unexpected clarity that arrives in a moment and changes everything in that moment. One conversation, one encounter, one piece of information that surfaces in a context that makes it impossible to dismiss or reinterpret or manage into a more comfortable shape. Example for the Ace of Swords that I want to be very specific about, because this card deserves specificity. Picture a woman named Tamsin. Tamsin had been in a situation, professional, relational. Does not matter the specifics, where she had been receiving a certain amount of confusion about why things were not moving the way she expected them to move. She had been doing everything right. She had been putting in the effort. She had been showing up. And yet certain doors stayed closed, and certain opportunities kept not materializing, and she kept getting these vague explanations that never quite satisfied. And then one day, in the most ordinary context imaginable, she was in a conversation with someone peripheral to the situation. Someone who had no stake in how Tamsin received the information. Someone who assumed Thompson already knew what they were about to say, because surely someone would have told her by now. And they told her. Casually, just drop the information into the conversation the way you reference something that is common knowledge. And Thompson had that experience, and I think most of you watching this have. Had some version of this experience where the information lands, and for about 3 seconds, you do not fully process it because it is so different from the version of reality you had been operating in that. Your brain needs a moment to reorient, and then it processes, and everything that had been confusing becomes clear. Every vague explanation suddenly has a real explanation behind it. Every door that seemed closed for mysterious reasons now has a visible, specific, concrete explanation for why it was closed. That is your Ace of Swords. That is the clarity that is coming. And yes, it will shatter some things. But what it shatters was always a construction rather than a foundation. What remains after the Ace of Swords does its work is real. And real is what you build on. Card 7, the world UARE, arriving at something that was always yours. And we close with the world. Of course we do. Of course, Spirit ends this reading with the world. The world is completion. It is the card of someone who has traveled the full circumference of a particular journey and arrived at the other side of it, carrying everything that journey was designed to give them. It is not the end of the story, it is the end of a chapter, the completion of a cycle, the arrival at a place that represents genuine wholeness after a process that was genuinely difficult. And in the context of everything this reading has covered the hiding, the management, the narrative that certain people have been controlling. The shattering that is coming when that control becomes impossible to maintain the world is Spirit saying, this is what it was all for. This is where the process was always heading. Not the hiding and the management, those were obstacles, not the design, but the arrival. The world moment when the full truth of who you are is finally operating without interference in spaces that recognize and respond to it. Practical example for the world in this specific reading. There is a man named Augustine, and Augustine had spent years in a professional environment where his genuine capabilities were known to a very small circle of people who had strategic reasons to keep that knowledge within that small circle. He was good. They knew he was good. And they used that goodness internally while carefully managing how visible it became externally. And then Augustine left that environment through a combination of his own courage and the kind of external disruption that Spirit sometimes engineers when a person is ready to move, but is not quite ready to move themselves. The situation collapsed, and Augustine was suddenly operating without the management that had been both protecting and limiting him simultaneously. In the first months, it was disorienting. Without the structure, even the limiting structure he had been operating within, everything felt uncertain. But then something started happening. The actual quality of what Augustine brought began speaking for itself in spaces where it had never had the chance to speak for itself before. And the response was so different from what he had been receiving within the managed environment that he had to spend some time recalibrating his own understanding of what he was worth and what he was capable of. That recalibration is the world. That arrival at a place where the full truth of who you are is finally operating in a space that can recognize it is the world. And it is where your reading is pointing, not as a future possibility, as a direction that is already in motion, already pulling you toward it with the specific gravity of something that was always meant to happen. What Spirit needs you to hear before this reading closes several things coming through strongly, and I am saying all of them. The first thing, the people who have been hiding what they know about you did not do you the favor they thought they were doing. Whatever the internal justification, protecting you from too much too soon, being strategic on your behalf, keeping things at a manageable pace, the actual effect was limitation. And when the full picture of what was being managed becomes clear to you, Spirit is asking you not to collapse into the betrayal of it. Feel it, process it honestly, and then redirect. Because the energy you spend in extended bitterness about what was hidden is energy that could be going toward what you are now free to build without the management. The second thing, the shattering in the title is not only happening to things around you. Some of what shatters is going to be your own understanding of certain relationships and certain dynamics. And that particular shattering, the internal one, the revision of your own picture of what certain people are and what certain connections actually were, is the most significant part of this process. Because it is what produces the new clarity about where to direct your trust going forward. The third thing, someone is about to see you fully, directly, without the filter of anyone else's management for the first time. And their response to what they see is going to be something that recalibrates your own self-assessment. Not because you need external validation to know your worth, but because after a period where your visibility has been controlled and your narrative has been curated by others, encountering someone who sees the full, real, unmediated version of you and responds to it with full recognition is going to land somewhere important. Let it land. Do not deflect it or dismiss it or rush past it. Let the recognition arrive and let it do what it is meant to do. The fourth thing. This reading is not asking you to become suspicious of everyone in your life. It is asking you to become more discerning. There is a difference between blanket suspicion and intelligent discernment. Intelligent discernment asks not who claims to support me, but who actually does, when it costs them something to do so. That question will clarify your circle very quickly. And the smaller, more genuine circle that remains after that clarification is going to be more valuable than the larger, more performed one that existed before. The fifth thing. The timing of this revelation, the shattering that is coming, the truth that is pressing against the veil and about to come through, is not random. It is landing now, because you are in a place to receive what comes after it. 6 months ago, or a year ago, the same revelation would have arrived without the foundation you now have to receive and process it from. Spirit does not shatter things before someone is ready to build something new in the space the shattering creates. You are ready. That is why this is happening now. Closing the only thing left to say I want to end this, reading the way Bernardet ended our conversation when I told her the story I started this with. After I shared what I had observed about the people who had claimed to brag about her while quietly managing her access to opportunity, she was quiet for a long moment. And then she said something I have been thinking about ever since. She said, I do not think the hiding was really about me. I think it was about them not being ready to exist next to the full version of me yet. And I spent a long time making myself smaller so that being next to me was more comfortable for them. And I am done with that. Not with anger. Just done. Not with anger. Just done. That is the energy this reading is inviting you into. Not rage at what was hidden. Not a campaign to expose anyone or reclaim anything dramatically. Just the quiet, clear, completely done with accommodating people who were not ready for the full version of you energy that comes when something finally and completely shatters the version of yourself you were living as to make other people comfortable. The full version of you is what they have been hiding about you. The full version is what is about to shatter everything. And the full version is what gets to exist freely on the other side of all of this. Be ready. And be ready to be extraordinary without asking anyone's permission for it. Leave something in the comments if this hit. Tell me which card landed hardest. Subscribe so you are here when the next one drops. And share this with a person who needs to hear that what certain people have been hiding about them is actually the best thing about them.